For years, Russia told the world it was back, that it was untouchable, that the West was in decline, and Moscow was rising. Now, its economy is bleeding, its soldiers are dying, and its empire is dying the same slow death as every fallen power before it. Because history has a script, and Russia is reading it line by line. Spain, Britain, the Soviet Union, all fell in 7 stages. Russia has reached stage 6, the final stop before collapse. War, debt, demographic decay, global isolation. Every warning light is flashing red. And yet, the Kremlin still insists everything is under control, just like the Soviets did, right before they vanished. So today, we're walking you through the collapse stage by stage as it happens in real time. Not theory, not prediction, but the unraveling of a superpower that still thinks it's winning. This is the terminal phase of Russia's illusion. And the fall is already underway. Think about this for a moment. Right now, as you watch this video, Russia is throwing everything it has at survival. Over 100,000 Russian soldiers have died this year alone. The budget deficit is exploding. Spending surged 29% in early 2025 compared to last year. Interest rates hit 21%, the highest in 25 years. And yet, nothing is working. The bleeding won't stop. This is what historians call a terminal spiral, when an empire's attempts to save itself only accelerate its destruction. And here's what makes this terrifying. Putin knows. He has to know, because every dying empire reaches this exact moment when denial becomes the only strategy left. The meetings in the Kremlin must be surreal now. Generals explaining why another 1,000 men died for nothing. Economic ministers pretending inflation is manageable while prices double. Demographic experts showing charts that look like cliff edges. And Putin sitting at his absurdly long table, pretending he doesn't see the empire dying in real time. Every dictator reaches this moment. Stalin died denying the doctor's plot he invented. Hitler spent his last days moving imaginary armies on a map. And now Putin, architect of Russia's destruction, conducting an orchestra that's already fled the building. But before we show you how this ends, we need to rewind. Because Russia didn't arrive at stage 6 overnight. It followed a pattern so predictable, so mathematically precise, that we can track it step by step. Every single empire dies the same way. Rome took 4 centuries to collapse. The British Empire took about 70 years. The Soviet Union? Just 7. And they all followed the exact same playbook. 7 stages, 7 steps from glory to rubble, overextension, currency debasement, debt spiral, productive collapse, social decay, international irrelevance, and finally, the fall itself. The Spanish Empire was the first global superpower. At its peak, it controlled territory on every inhabited continent. Its currency was the world's reserve. Its military was considered invincible. Sound familiar? By 1640, Spain had checked every box. Endless wars in Europe drained the treasury. They debased their currency by mixing copper into silver coins. They defaulted on loans 4 times. Their productive economy collapsed as they relied entirely on gold from the Americas. Birth rates plummeted, and when the gold ran out, the empire that ruled the world for 2 centuries was suddenly nothing. Britain's collapse was more graceful but followed the same pattern. 2 world wars broke them financially. The pound lost its reserve status. Colonies broke away. By 1956, when the Suez Crisis exposed their weakness, the empire that once ruled a quarter of the planet couldn't even control a canal. But the most relevant example? The Soviet Union. Because what's happening to Russia now is almost a carbon copy of what happened to the USSR in the 1980s. The patterns are so exact, it's almost mathematical. Economic overheating followed by sudden cooling. Military victories that become Pyrrhic defeats. Allies who suddenly discover other priorities. Even the rhetoric is identical. The desperate appeals to patriotism, the blame on foreign enemies, the promises that victory is just months away. If you showed these patterns to any historian without telling them the country, they'd say the same thing. This empire has maybe 5 years left, probably less. And just like today's Russia, the Soviets insisted everything was fine, right until the moment it wasn't. Let's start with stage 1, because Russia's collapse began the moment Putin convinced himself he could rebuild the Soviet Empire. February 24, 2022. the day Russia signed its own death warrant. Putin promised a 3-day special military operation. He got a 3-year meat grinder instead. Russia has now suffered over 1 million casualties, killed and wounded in Ukraine. Think about that number. 1 million sons, fathers, husbands gone or broken forever. But the numbers only tell part of the story. Military spending now consumes roughly 7 to 8% of Russia's GDP, double what America spends, triple what most NATO countries spend. In 2025, Russia plans to allocate 40% of its entire federal budget to defense and security spending. Imagine that, nearly half of every tax ruble going to fund a war that was supposed to last 3 days. And here's what's truly insane: they're losing. In all of 2024, Russian forces seized just 4,168 square kilometers, less than 1% of Ukraine. They're paying in blood for every meter, and they're running out of both. According to Medusa, the true death toll is estimated between 200,000 and 220,000 Russians killed. Not wounded, not missing, dead, gone forever. More than America lost in Vietnam, Iraq, and Afghanistan combined in just 3 years. These aren't just statistics. These are entire generations being erased. Entire villages in Siberia and the Caucasus have lost their prime-age males to the front. Wives without husbands, children without fathers, communities without futures. And for what? A few abandoned Ukrainian villages and fields? Territory that's been so thoroughly destroyed it's worthless? This is what overextension looks like in real time. An empire bleeding itself dry for gains so small they're barely visible on a map. But the real cost isn't measured in kilometers. It's measured in what comes next. Because when empires overextend militarily, they always turn to the same solution. They debase their currency. They print money. They destroy the very foundation of their economy. Which brings us to stage 2 and the ruble's death spiral. Remember when $1 dollar bought 75 rubles? That was early 2022. Today, over 110 rubles. That's a collapse of about 47%, but that's not even the real problem. The real problem is that Russians have stopped believing in their own currency. The money supply has doubled since 2021, from 62 trillion rubles to 118 trillion in February 2025. They're literally printing money to pay for the war, and everyone knows what that means. Inflation is officially at 9%. Walk into any Moscow grocery store and you'll see the real number. Butter prices doubled, meat prices through the roof. Core inflation hit 9.7% annualized in October 2024, and that's with the government desperately trying to hide the real numbers. The central bank's solution? Raise interest rates to 21%, the highest since the 1990s collapse. But here's the dirty secret: it's not working, because you can't fight wartime inflation with monetary policy. Not when the government is the one flooding the economy with printed money. By 2023, the Chinese yuan had replaced the US dollar as the most traded currency on the Moscow exchange. Think about that. Russians trust China's currency more than their own. They're literally abandoning the ruble for foreign money, the ultimate vote of no confidence. And why wouldn't they? The ruble is toilet paper dressed up as money. Everyone knows it. The government knows it. They just can't admit it. Because admitting it would mean acknowledging what comes next, the debt spiral that no empire survives, which is exactly what's happening right now. Stage 3 is when the bills come due, and Russia's bills are astronomical. Russia recorded a budget deficit of 3.49 trillion rubles in 2024. That's after revenues jumped 26%. They're making more money than ever, spending even more, and still can't balance the books. But here's where it gets truly desperate. The government spent more on debt repayment and interest than it raised from new borrowing. They're literally going backward, paying more to service old debt than they can borrow in new money. The liquid portion of the National Wealth Fund, Russia's rainy day money, stands at just $31 billion. That's it. That's all they have left after burning through hundreds of billions. At the current burn rate, they'll be completely broke within 2 years. And they can't borrow internationally. Cut off from global markets, trapped with 21% interest rates at home, they're stuck in a vice that's only tightening. The budget deficit for 2024 exceeded projections by more than double. They planned for 1.6 trillion rubles. They got 3.3 trillion. And 2025, the deficit is projected to remain above 1.5% of GDP indefinitely. Indefinitely. That's government speak for we have no idea how to fix this. The math is simple and terrifying. War spending up, tax revenues flat, borrowing costs exploding, reserves nearly gone. You know what comes next, don't you? When governments can't borrow and can't tax, they have one option left, one that the Soviets tried, one that Weimar Germany tried, one that Venezuela tried. They print until the money becomes worthless and the economy becomes a corpse. Which leads us directly to stage 4, the death of Russia's actual economy. Here's what's really happening inside Russia. The economy is being hollowed out like a carved pumpkin. Industrial output growth fell to near zero in February 2025. Investment is collapsing. A 0.5% decline in investment is expected in 2026. The private sector has essentially stopped spending on anything except survival. But the real catastrophe? The exodus. About 650,000 Russians emigrated in 2022-2023 following the invasion, primarily young professionals in tech, science, and business. The very people Russia needed to build a modern economy. They're gone, and they're not coming back. Over 1,500 foreign companies have left Russia since 2022. Toyota, Volkswagen, Microsoft, Apple, the entire Western corporate world pulled out. And what replaced them? Chinese knockoffs and domestic substitutes that don't work. Russia can't even produce commercial airliners anymore. They're cannibalizing their existing fleet for parts. Weapons production is running at zero profit margins, sometimes negative. The vaunted military-industrial complex is basically a money incinerator. By the end of 2024, Russian companies were short 2.2 million workers. Almost 70% of businesses reported severe labor shortages. You can't run an economy when everyone's either dead, fled, or fighting. And here's the sickest irony. The only thing keeping Russia's economy moving is the war. Military production, soldier salaries, death payments to families. That's the economy now. They've created a war-driven GDP that looks like growth, but is actually decay. The Center for Macroeconomic Analysis admits private sector investment has virtually stopped growing. Companies aren't building factories. They're not developing technology. They're not training workers. They're just trying to survive until what? Until the war ends? Until sanctions lift? Until the economy magically recovers? It won't, because this isn't a recession you recover from. It's economic death by 1,000 cuts, and Russia is already bleeding from 999. What happens when the war ends? Or worse, what happens when they can't sustain it anymore? The productive economy is already gone. What's left is a zombie animated by military spending and nothing else. And zombies, as we all know, eventually stop walking. But economies can survive a lot. They can survive debt, inflation, even production collapse. What they can't survive is when the people themselves give up. Welcome to Stage 5, where societies don't just decline, they disintegrate. In 2024, Russia recorded just 1.222 million births, the lowest since 1999. The first quarter of 2025 saw fewer than 294,000 births, the lowest quarterly figure in 225 years. Let that sink in. The lowest in 225 years. Not since Napoleon invaded has Russia seen birth rates this catastrophic. The natural population decline in 2024 was 596,200 people. Deaths exceeded births by over 500,000. The total fertility rate is just 1.41 children per woman, far below the 2.1 needed for replacement. But it's not just about babies, it's about hope, or rather the complete absence of it. In some regions, deaths outnumber births by 3 to 1. Entire regions are becoming graveyards. Over 18% of Russians are now senior citizens, a record high. By 2050, nearly a quarter of the population will be elderly. Who's going to work? Who's going to fight? Who's going to pay the pensions? Nobody, because they were never born. And those who were born are leaving or dying. Hundreds of thousands more wounded, many disabled for life. The young are gone. The middle-aged are exhausted. The old are forgotten. This is demographic collapse in real time. Russia has started classifying demographic data, hiding the true scale of the catastrophe. When governments start hiding population statistics, you know the situation is beyond salvation. Putin even created a demographic special forces unit to boost birth rates. Special forces for making babies. If it wasn't so pathetic, it would be funny. But here's the thing about demographic collapse. It's irreversible. You can't suddenly create 20-year-olds. You can't resurrect the dead. You can't force women to have children in a country with no future. The population pyramid isn't a pyramid anymore. It's a coffin. Wide at the top, narrow at the bottom, and getting narrower every day. Societies can recover from war. They can recover from economic crisis. They can't recover when there's no one left to recover. Which brings us to stage 6. The stage Russia has reached, the point where the world simply stops caring whether you exist or not. This is where we are now. Today, November 2025, Russia has become irrelevant. Remember when Europe depended on Russian gas? Russia's share of EU pipeline gas imports plummeted from over 40% in 2021 to about 11% in 2024. Europe weaned itself off Russian energy in less than 3 years. Russian oil now trades at massive discounts, $56 to $57 per barrel versus global prices. The petrostate that once held Europe hostage with energy is now begging China and India to buy its oil at bargain basement prices. Even traditional allies are walking away. Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan refuse to endorse the war. Armenia is publicly broken with Moscow. Nobody wants the ruble. Nobody trusts it. $300 billion of Russia's central bank reserves remain frozen by sanctions. Their money is literally being held hostage and they can't do anything about it. But here's the real indicator of irrelevance. The G7 doesn't include them. The G20 barely tolerates them. International forums happen without them. They've become a Chinese gas station, a junior partner selling resources at discount prices to the only country still willing to deal with them. China's two-way trade with Russia hit a record $240 billion in 2023, but it's not a partnership, it's dependency. Russia wanted to be feared, then they wanted to be respected. Now they'd settle for being relevant. But they're not. They're a nuclear-armed relic with a dying population and a collapsing economy, desperately fighting a war they can't win with money they don't have. The world has moved on. Europe found new energy. NATO got stronger. Ukraine became a hero. And Russia? Russia became a memory of what happens when empires refuse to accept reality. This is stage 6, the irrelevance before extinction. The moment when everyone realizes you're already gone, you just haven't stopped moving yet. But stage 7, that's when the movement stops. Here's what keeps Putin awake at night. Not NATO, not sanctions, not even losing in Ukraine. It's the sound of history repeating itself. Because he knows what stage 7 looks like. He watched it happen in 1991. The Soviet Union didn't explode, it simply stopped existing. One day it was there, the next day it wasn't. And the signs are already here. Regional governors are hoarding resources, ignoring Moscow's demands. Ethnic Russians now make up only 70% of the population and falling. Republics like Chechnya and Tatarstan are watching, waiting, calculating when to make their move. The economic triggers are all in place. If oil prices drop significantly or sanctions tighten further, Russia faces an economic implosion it can't survive. No reserves to cushion the fall. No borrowing capacity, no printing press solution that doesn't lead to hyperinflation. What does collapse look like? It's not dramatic, it's pathetic. Government salaries stop being paid, pensions disappear, police stop showing up for work, regions stop sending taxes to Moscow. The military, what's left of it, starts choosing sides. Maybe it starts in the Far East, where Moscow's control has always been weakest. Maybe in the Caucasus, where ethnic tensions simmer. Maybe in Kaliningrad, cut off from the mainland and surrounded by NATO. Or maybe it starts in Moscow itself, a palace coup, a military mutiny, another Wagner-style march that doesn't stop this time. Russian analysts themselves warn the country faces bankruptcy in the medium term. The economy is on a spinning top that will fall if it slows down. But here's the truly terrifying part. Russia has nuclear weapons, thousands of them. What happens to those weapons when the state that controls them ceases to exist? Who gets them? Who sells them? Who uses them? The Soviet collapse was messy but peaceful. This one might not be, because Putin, unlike Gorbachev, won't go quietly. He'll burn it all down rather than admit defeat. The man who started a war to prevent NATO expansion has caused the largest NATO expansion in history. The man who invaded Ukraine to rebuild the empire has accelerated its final collapse. History doesn't repeat, it rhymes, and right now it's rhyming with 1991, 1917, 1610, every time Russia has torn itself apart. The only question isn't if Russia collapses, it's how violent the collapse will be, and whether the rest of the world survives it. Stage 6 isn't ahead of Russia, it's under its feet. The mistakes have already been made, the empire already hollowed, the illusion already shattered. Economic growth has fallen to 1% and dropping. Birth rates at 200-year lows, hundreds of thousands of soldiers lost, budget deficits exceeding anything sustainable. The Kremlin knows it. That's why they're hiding statistics, classifying demographic data, and pretending everything's under control. That's why Putin talks about nuclear weapons more than victory. That's why Russian state TV has stopped promising to take Kiev and started threatening nuclear apocalypse. They know what we know, what history has always known. Empires die in stages. Russia has reached the terminal stage. Now comes the denial. Then comes the fall. Russia isn't collapsing, it's already collapsed. The only thing left is the crash. When it comes, not if, but when. Remember that you watched it happen. Stage by stage, mistake by mistake, lie by lie. The empire that claimed it was eternal proved it was exactly like all the others. Already gone, just too proud to admit it. So what do you think? Is Russia headed for peaceful dissolution like the Soviet Union, or something far worse? And more importantly, who's going to be there to pick up the pieces? Let us know in the comments, because history is being written right now, and we're all watching it happen in real time.